velkou ctí uvést našeho dalšího přednášejícího, Johna Meeka, který přednese přednášku s názvem A Holistic Approach to Masonry, neboli holistický celostní přístup k zednářství. Já teď předám mikrofon sem a zase se odeberu opatro níž, kde budu tlumočit.
Okay, so we are continuing our talks. This time we welcome Mr. John Meek, who will present his talk on the holistic approach to Masonry. So, the floor is yours.
Sorry about the technical delay here. Okay, as he said, my name is John Meek. I am, as far as parameters, I'm operating on a little bit different set of parameters for this. I'm as much of an academic as I am a practitioner, if you want to call Masonry a practice. So my parameters are, and I'll go into this in a minute because that's actually part of this. My parameters are the rituals, constitutions, bylaws, and landmarks of Masonry, which we'll go into that in a minute. As far as basis of information, before I go any further, what I'm saying is not on behalf of any Grand Lodge or Masonic body. This is from me as a person. So before we go there, my title within Masonry, within Illinois Masonry, is Right Worshipful Brother John Meek, Grand Representative to the Grand Lodge of Russia and the United Grand Lodge of Bulgaria near Illinois. It is a diplomatic role. So my specialization is actually interjurisdictional Masonry, how the different fraternities interact between each other. I'm a past master of a Masonic Lodge in Illinois, member of numerous what they call appendant bodies. Some are more charitable, fun-oriented. Some are like the honorary secretary of the Bulgarian Grand Chapter of the Widow's Sons. From that extreme to conductor of novices in the London College of Adepts of the SRIA, the Masonic Rosicrucians. So my experience runs the gamut of anything and everything in between. The basis, how this came about, this is actually a lecture I've given dozens of times in lodges and Grand Lodge sessions, the holistic approach to Freemasonry. Because of all the orders, of all the fraternities, of all the organizations, Freemasonry holds a unique place in that it's truly a multifaceted diamond. It has many moving parts, many little specialties in it. It almost looks like a chameleon depending on how you look at it. It's like, well, on this side, like I've heard a lot about Masons today. Well, it's an esoteric order. Well, yeah, kind of. But if you go to the other extreme, you'll have Masons that say, well, no, that's witchcraft. It's actually nothing more than a fraternity and a charitable organization. Well, yeah, it's that too. But the reality is it takes all these things into account. And it's this presence of mind that it is a diamond, it's a sphere. If we maintain this, we can maintain new membership from today into the future and correctly functioning membership. Again, don't forget, the whole context of this is the holism of Masonry, but it can be plugged into any of these orders because of the number of Masons that are in these orders. But we'll get to that at that point. Excuse me. So, generally from the outside, there's many opinions on what Freemasonry is. It's either, like I said, the Shriners, or it could be a conspiracy to take over the world, which we can't agree on we can't agree on what we're having for dinner, much less what country to start with. So, I mean, no, but it's all of the yellow press that's built up over the years, from the anti-Masonic papal bulls all the way up to the yellow press of the communists and everything in between, because there were a number of suppressions of Freemasonry over the centuries. And the curiosity of it has stuck in the popular mind. So we're still dealing with it. In Bulgaria, it's still very, 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 very quiet because of stuff that was written about it 40, 50 years ago when it was suppressed. But this is how we deal. So outside of Freemasonry, there's a million and one ideas of what we're actually doing. Within Freemasonry, it's very similar. Again, some of the Masons will tell you it's the Shriners. Other guys will tell you it's the SRA is the heart of it all. And the truth is, each of these contribute to the function of what Masonry should be doing. Now, let's define our terms. Holistic Masonry, Freemasonry. There's several catchphrases out there today, especially in the English-speaking world. We believe in the brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God, making good men better. All these things boil down to is that we really are two things. One, we're a fraternity. We're a group of guys, for lack of a better word, group of men. I'll get to that in a minute. And we're a mentoring system. Excuse me. The fraternity aspect, we come together, we share ideas, we share values. The mentoring aspect, we pass those values down in the hopes of, through supporting each other and teaching the new generation to make society better, to go back into our jobs, our families, and to build society that way. And within that structure, though, that's where the details are. Within that, in holism, of course, holism is where you have the many parts, which are great, but they really don't flourish, they really don't bloom until they're taken as a whole, when that whole becomes more than the sum of those parts. The Masonic Rosicrucians, sorry, because there's many lines of Rosicrucians out there. The Masonic Rosicrucians are great, but they're absolutely useless without the Shriners. For those who don't know what Shriners are, they run the charitable hospitals. They're a group of Masons that run charitable hospitals. Some do burn, some do orthopedic, but that. And when I have a new set of candidates coming in for the Rosicrucians in London, I'll usually give an informal talk. You know, it's great that you're here. This is, you know, when Westcott was in this order, Waite, everybody, the Golden Dawn sprung out of this order, and it's wonderful esoteric work. However, there is nothing more esoteric than taking care of a homeless or very, very poor baby. That is the height of all esotericism, is that, because if we keep it within ourselves, it ultimately becomes a cancer. Going out, it flourishes. So you see how it works together. There's a straight line. Now, again, it's a holistic Freemasonry, which is a fraternity and a mentoring system. But what makes us unique? What makes us different from the Lions, the Knights of Columbus, and all these other fraternal groups? And what makes us different from the Martinists and non-Masonic Rosicrucians and everything else out there? Our symbolism and our methods. At this point, I'm going to just stop real quick to say what we're not. Masonry is its own legitimate system of symbols and practices. There are many other lineages, other traditions out there which are good in and of themselves. However, they exist in their own world, we exist in ours. Yes, there is movement back and forth, absolutely. A lot of us are Martinists, for example, but each group of methods to its own. Masons are Masons. Masons are not magicians. Masons are not alchemists. We share symbols with the alchemists. I would even go so far as to say we're brothers, let's do this backwards. I would even go so far as to say we're either cousins or brothers of the alchemists, because we're doing the same thing. We're doing the magnum opus, or we're doing the great work, where the alchemists say we're reducing into the philosopher's stone. We say we're taking the rock, that rough boulder, carving it into the perfect brick and placing it into the temple. We are far more active. It is in the Masonic nature to go out and build, not only to reduce and to heal, but to go out and build. It's a very fundamental difference. Yes, we use the same symbol of Solomon's temple, but we use it in the sense of we build the interior temple in the self in order to go out and build it into the world. By the way, interesting note, anyone ever wondered why we meet in lodges? Because as the allegory goes, next to the work site of Solomon's temple was the lodge where the Masons were sleeping and working, doing the side work. So hence we meet in lodges inside a building called a temple. Now, with all of this as a basis, we've gone from the fraternity and mentoring system to the symbol of working within the temple, the spiritual temple, projecting out. Now we come into, I can't stray too far out of my niche, we come into the question of jurisdiction and practice. There is no, and this is where the conspiracy theorists always go wrong, there is no worldwide Masonic fraternity. There is a network of individual fraternities, each defining, and this will play later, each defining what Masonry is and is not for itself. And once it steps out into the world scene, then traditionally the younger ones will approach the older ones looking for acceptance, which we call recognition. And these are on core values, belief in God, men only, in many cases, demand for the Hiramic legend. There are what are called landmarks in Masonry. But here's the interesting thing. Each jurisdiction has its own. Even though we might agree on 90% or whatever, we're still sovereign in and of ourselves. So what we're doing in, like my case, what we're doing in Illinois has absolutely, going to an extreme is not a good way to go, but to give an example, theoretically speaking, what we do in Illinois has absolutely nothing to do with what the English are doing in London. We're two separate fraternities, even though we're in recognition with each other. We're all brothers, but within separate fraternities. That's why you have grand representatives and grand chanceries. We're going back and forth to make sure the wheels turn correctly. Now, with that as a basis, what needs to be kept in mind during this talk is we all do it differently. To quote Masonic ritual and say this is how it is, you can't quote an Illinois ritual and apply it to the Greeks. They have their ritual, we have ours. As a general rule of thumb, though not binding, American Masonry is far more moralistic in its ritual work. Continental Masonry, depending where you're going, is actually Hermetic. There's a lodge that I'm thinking of in particular that works what's called the German Anfam rite, which is a derivative of the Schroeder rite. It looks much more like a Martinist degree, one of their degrees. Walked in, sat down, like, oh. Didn't look like the Masonic degrees I went through, but it looked like the Martinist degree I went through. And so there's that much variation. It's the core beliefs. Now, again, with all that as a basis, let's go back to what is holistic Masonry and how is it lived. Again, it's working on it takes an exoteric man, the profane man, as we'll say here, the outsider, for lack of a better word, who comes and knocks on a lodge door. He wants something. Now, this is a very important part of the process. The Masons have to determine two things when letting a man in. And by the way, I keep saying man because I'm only speaking about what's regular and widely recognized Masonry. In other words, mainstream Masonry. There are women's lodges, there are co-ed lodges, but they're their own network. We are two completely different things, the mainstream Masonry and then the mixed and the women's. So I'm not a mixed Mason, I'm not a woman Mason. I have no idea what they're doing over there. So I can only talk about mainstream, which I know. The man will come into the lodge or try to join the lodge, and it's impingent upon the lodge to determine two things. One, is he good for Masonry? Is he a criminal? Is he a good man? Whatever. Does he have the characteristics that the lodge needs? But conversely, is the Masonry, number one, number two, the lodge, are these things good for him? Will he flourish? Because just like with any other order, they're not for everybody. You have these guys throughout history, you have Westcott, Waite, Pappas, where they're running through all sorts of orders. They're a member of just about anything alive. But how much did they practice these various orders? Pappas was a very devoted artist, but was he devoted in other things? There's only so many hours in the day. So what needs to be determined is he good for us? Are we good for him? And then once that's, let's say this is determined through, of course, voting methods, which there's no time for here, he has to be initiated, because going back to that holistic idea, the beating heart of Masonry really is the esoteric Masonry. It's that esoteric core. Whether or not a member knows it's even there, because I know guys who don't, they'll say right out, it's witchcraft, but they still live the principles, which is very interesting. That esoteric stuff, that's witchcraft. But he lives the same principles the ones who are into all the esoteric orders are doing, just naturally. The esoteric component is the beating heart, so in order to tap into that, that's why we have initiatic practices. This is why we have degrees. And throughout the world, basically there are three craft lodge degrees. Craft lodge being the Masons as the Masons. Yes, of course, you go up to Sweden, Norway, they have an integrated 10-degree system, but still it's that third degree that's the real watershed one. And the initiatic practice, the initiatic action starts at the first degree when the guy knocks on the door. It's accentuated in the second degree, and it's completed in the third. There's an entire arc. If you look at I've looked at multiple rites, multiple versions of the degrees, and there's always an arc. And the technical terms are, in English, initiation, starting, passing for the second degree, you're moving through, and then raising, where he's become a full third degree Mason, full Master Mason. So there's an arc, and in that arc there's that initiatic working within the soul. What's the point of an initiation besides, well, there's teaching of principles through symbols, because there's various levels of education, so we always go back to symbols because they're multifaceted, and the more capacity a man has, the more he can dig. So its symbols are naturally layered, number one. Number two, initiatic actions, going back to the ancient mystery schools, initiatic actions, they trigger something. Now it depends how far down the rabbit hole you want to go with this. You could say it triggers something in the very soul of man, or you could say it triggers something in his mind, psychologically. Whatever it is, it triggers something. We see this repeatedly, where you have the rituals, you go through the whole thing, you go through the actions, and you're able to contemplate these symbols on a deeper level. And that opens up one of two things. Either you stay with just being what in America we call Blue Lodge Mason. You're in Lodge, that's it, you're done. Or you can go on to one of the more specialized subgroups of Freemasonry. And why do these subgroups exist? Again, going back to the holistic idea, to the idea of the diamond. Each man who comes in, each Mason, has a unique set of talents and a unique set of shortcomings. And you have to play to those strengths. Me, I couldn't balance books if my life depended on it, so being treasurer is just, I avoid that like the plague. But I'm very good in a diplomatic role. So they plugged me in there and run with it. So they knew where not to put me, they knew where to put me. And that's part of the education process that picks up where the initiation process leaves off. Theoretically, at least, the older members, somebody should tag on to a younger one and say, come here, you saw that in the degree, well here, let's take a look at these different interpretations. Likewise, the older one should be looking at the younger one saying, okay, well, he really can't do treasure, but he'd be good at that. So let's kind of funnel him in this direction. And through that process, the lodge grows and is healthy. And it's working on that physical plane, and this is where we are similar to the alchemists. It's working on that physical plane, building, that the interior work also gets done. Why are we doing this at the Blue Lodge level? To help my brothers to get them through whatever and that. But then, and that's only at the lodge level, then we have what are called dependent bodies. The small little specialized groups. Some are heavily philosophical. Some are continuations of those 3 degrees. Like not every rite, but a lot of rites due to historical circumstances. Actually, the rites in some cases, like you've heard of the Scottish rite with 33 degrees. Technically, that is one entire rite of Masonry. One way to do it, it's just due to historical circumstances, they chop the first 3 degrees off, put these 3 at the lodge level, these 3 as if you want to. Same thing with the Royal Arch. Royal Arch and Mark Masonry used to be part of Emulation Rite Masonry, Preston Webb Masonry, which is the majority of America. My lodge was Preston Webb, right? And then we stopped at 3rd, and if you want, you go into the Mark, then you go into, in America, the Royal Arch, which has its own little set of degrees. But those were originally part of one entire system at one point. So now it's a specialty system, and then those are for if you want to complete it. Now, if you feel drawn towards charity, Shriners Hospitals, the clowns, literally, they're clowns. They make money that way for the hospital. The Grotto does dental care for kids with mental impairments. That's on the one extreme. On the other extreme, again, the Rosicrucians. Or if you go into England, there actually is a Masonic Martinist order. There's another one in Greece, I believe. So you have that entire gamut where guys can plug in, where their strengths are. The more spiritually minded will necessarily gravitate towards the SRA. Now here's the interesting thing. The talk I give in London often is not needed because they may go in this direction, but they'll almost automatically go in the other direction, both extremes. some of your most active grotto men are very active in either Masonic esoteric bodies or non-Masonic esoteric bodies. So that there's that natural balance that, again, completes that diamond. Some only go in one, some only go in the other, but the majority will touch both at some point in their quote-unquote Masonic career. But that's on the active, on the work side. Again, Masonry is designed to be a diamond, a sphere. There is, if all you do is esoteric work, you do become, you get too far into it. You get so far in your niche, you don't see out of it. If you do only the charity work, you burn out. No matter what you do, both ends you burn out. Hence, there's the truly fraternal aspect. A lot of time, what we jokingly call fork and knife masons, they join for the dinners, which is, it is true, which is not ideal, but at the same time, those dinners, those outings, going to football matches, going to whatever, those round out all of that esoteric and exoteric work. Because don't forget, if we're going to talk esoteric ideas and hermeticism and everything else, as above, so below, but so as below, so above, there has to be that balance. And that's what those social things do. Those balance out those other two extremes to keep the individual Mason grounded into this world. Because if you go in the corners, you're throwing that balance off necessarily. And we can't balance out the world around us if we're not ourselves balanced. And I'm bringing this one step even further out. Okay, this charity work is fine, this interior work is fine. What ultimately does it have to do with the community at large? Because don't forget, all goes back to the brother, one of the principles, the brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God. We're to project out what we've done interiorly. And that is, you read in all these conspiracy ideas, movies and everything, Masons are running this, Masons are running that. Masons don't run anything. There is no political influence. In fact, if there's one thing that will get you thrown out of the lodge is playing politics. Bringing politics or religion to the lodge, that is a guaranteed almost. Now, yeah, it's almost a guaranteed expulsion at one point, or at least a suspension. But we improve ourselves to improve the community around us. And throughout the history of war, modern wars, there have always been Masons on both sides helping each other. In the American Civil War, in the American War, Revolutionary War, there were British and American soldiers helping each other. Not against their own armies, but they would help if they saw a Mason in need. Same thing in the American Civil War. There are cases where Masons on the other army, if they found out that there was like a Masonic bride somewhere, like if the men were off fighting, there was a woman and kids, they found out her husband was a Mason, they would actually guard that house. Make sure from their own army. Move along, go there, not here. Or if a lodge was raided, they would go under a flag of truce and return it. That was in the American Civil War. In World War II, in the North African campaign, there were cases where among the Americans and the Germans, where when they were going through, if they noticed one guy was a Mason, and they would often sit with him as he died and then give him a Masonic burial, even though they were on the opposite armies. And this is an important historical thread, especially, this is very close to my heart, doing what I do, is what does Masonry ultimately do in this facet of it? And it's actually in the Preston Web ritual. It brings men of varying countries and opinions together who would otherwise remain at a perpetual distance. That's what Masonry does. That's the influence it has. Not influence, but this is the effect it has. There's World War II. There's a German over there. He's a German. We're fighting him. But, okay, he's got whatever. All of a sudden, a switch is flipped in my head. That's my brother. He automatically goes from an enemy combatant to a human being. Masonry is unique in that it can humanize anybody in the world. Even you can hate him, that's still my brother. It automatically humanizes. That is the solidarity of the workmen in the temple. It's like any other construction. You're working in the temple, you're working together. He's pouring rocks, he's carving them. Two different things, but they're still working together. And it's a camaraderie. It doesn't take us away from our responsibilities, but it does bring us together in those often conflicting responsibilities. And so that is the far-reaching, or that's the stretch of the far-reaching hand of Masonry into the world, going from the interior work on the individual to the day-to-day work, to the man who's 1,000 miles away from his home, holding his enemy's hand as he dies. And this has been recorded in history. This is the esoteric heart of the craft, is to see the humanity, to be the, as they say in the second degree, in the German AFM right, to become the Adam Kadmon through working on our individual stones. As it says in the rectified rite, the 6th grade, we each bring a stone into the temple. We each bring one. Regardless of where we're from, no exceptions. And it's that solidarity that reaches out across the world, and that is the true esoteric heart of Masonry, and it's only through living it as a sphere, going through the everyday life of the contemplations into the work, into the world. Now, any questions?
I would have repeated it.